Okay, so let's continue with the analysis of this game, which I believe is a very, very interesting game. I could say that this is one of my best games ever, although is absent of a lot of tactical combinations. The strategical aspect of the game is very, very good. So as I said, the previous move of white was pawn to b5. The aim of white playing pawn to b5 is to open files. If you have rooks, you would like to open lines for those rooks, and the lines that rooks work on are called files. So he played b5 with the idea of just capturing on c6, and after he captures on c6, then a rook will appear on b2, then another rook on b1, and he's going to start using a lot of pressure. So I play pawn to c5, okay, and after pawn to c5, my opponent plays the move pawn to b6. And when my opponent plays the move pawn to b6, I try to picture how is he going to invade after making this move. And I could imagine something like rook to b2, followed by rook to b5, rook to f5, and then rook here. And from this point, I mean, he could start putting a lot of pressure in the position. It will look like it's not possible, but it is quite possible actually to do so. Okay, and now my opponent play pawn to b5, and I pawn to b6, sorry, and I play in this position now knight to c6. This is an important move. I need to start activating my pieces. I need to start playing a good chess game because my opponent is actually playing some good moves here. He has been applying a lot of pressure during the game and not letting me do much. So now this stage of the game, after I fix my weakness, which was this pawn on h6, after I fix that part in the game, now this stage here is to play now to improve my pieces. So look, all my pieces are a bit passive now. Now I have to try to make sure and improve all of my pieces. So I play knight c6. My opponent plays bishop to b5, immediately creating new threats. He's creating like a double attack, attacking this pawn, attacking the knight. And the whole point about this is that if I try to protect my pawn and he takes my knight, then he remains with a passed pawn. For example, if I play a move like rook a8, and notice I have to continue to calculate variations during the game, he could play something like bishop takes c6, and after pawn takes c6, then he could play a move like rook here with the idea of pushing this pawn forward. See, pushing this pawn forward. This could be very annoying because let's say I try to come closer, he attacks, he pushes the pawn, I defend, and then he could just bring this rook here. He could attack this rook, then he could bring the other rook. And notice this position where white is doing a lot. I mean, white is doing very, very well in this kind of positions. I mean, my pieces don't have most places to go. And ideas of rook here, followed by rook takes this pawn, could be something coming in the future. Now, to avoid that, I need to play more active. So I decided to sacrifice a pawn, and I play knight to a5. So knight to a5, the idea is simple, to improve my pieces. He captures the pawn on a4, that is what he went there for. And now I play the move pawn to c4. Very, very good move. Now opening the lines that I want to use and that I can use. Now, here my opponent play king back to e2, trying to bring the king to the queen side and to the center. Notice that, as I said before, this part of the game, which is the king side is not going to work, or is not going to be used anymore because it's just locked. Okay, so now what remains to play on, the area that remains to play on is on the center and the queen side. So this is where the play is going to happen. So my opponent plays king to e2, defending the pawn on d3. Of course, he could have taken the pawn, but this is bad because after I play knight takes, I create multiple threats. I create the threat of knight d2, check, attacking two pieces. I create a threat against this pawn. I create a threat against this pawn, and something is going to fall. So I will be recovering the material, and my pieces now. Notice how my pieces that were active, all of a sudden they are becoming that were passive. Now they are becoming active. So my opponent played king to d3 to avoid that, and I play the move pawn takes, check, king captures, and now I play rook to c4. The idea of rook c4 is very, very simple as well. I just want to play knight to c4. So I put my rook here to support the jump of my knight to c4, where my knight will be creating ideas of knight takes this pawn, knight takes this pawn, knight here to create an attack on this rook, to create an attack on this pawn. So I just want to improve my pieces and make them be attacking pieces instead of passive pieces, okay? Have them very active, okay? Now, rook to c8, my opponent plays bishop to b5, fighting against the jump of my knight to c4. And here now I play the move pawn to d5, sacrificing this pawn because this is the way that my knight, this next knight, could get active, that my king could also get active to come into the center of the board, and for this knight to be working as well. And when I push this pawn, the idea that I have is that I want to have this pawn on e5 become a dangerous pawn, become a pass pawn. But I have to be very careful and calculate properly because I am sacrificing pawns. After pawn takes, notice, after pawn takes, if we look at material, we could say that, okay, my opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns, sorry, and I only have 4 pawns. So notice I have been sacrificing pawns for the longest while, and I have sacrificed so far 3 pawns. My opponent has 7 pawns, I have only 4 pawns, but in the way I'm playing this game, the pawns are blocked, so they cannot advance. So my opponent's pawns are blocked and they cannot advance, and they are going to become targets as well. So here now, after pawn takes, I create a next sacrifice and I play the move pawn to d5, check, sacrificing another pawn. Can someone tell me what is the point of this move? Can the king take that pawn?
No. Well, when the king takes a pawn, you move the knight to d6, check, and then you win the bishop.
Okay, very good. So yeah, he shouldn't take this pawn because then I will play knight takes, knight here, check. Okay, and then I most likely will take the bishop. Now notice that I could even try after king takes pawn. If I don't want to win the bishop immediately, a move like rook takes is very strong as well, or very interesting. The idea of rook takes is that I am also attacking other pawns, but the king all of a sudden doesn't feel so safe. It cannot go back. A check is coming here, and the king could be in a mating net very, very quickly. You see, very, very dangerous for the king. Well, at this point, he could play king here, for example, but king there could, could be made by a move like perhaps rook takes here. And now my idea is to maybe bring this king here. A knight here check is also very dangerous. So notice how my opponent is having like a very bad day now, because this knight check here followed by a knight here check will actually lose the game for him. For example, if he pushes his pawn, I could play knight check. Only move could be left or right. It doesn't matter because then this move here will end up being checkmate. The king cannot go anywhere. So even rook takes could be a very dangerous move for white. If he enters a position that looks normal, and all of a sudden after king takes, the king starts feeling very trapped in that position. Notice that again, I could use candidate moves to find a strong move, because for example, if king takes, the normal move is let's check, capture this, and then attack these 2 pawns here, like check here, sorry, I check here, he moves, capture this, and I am creating an attack against these 2 pawns. This is it is looking good. But on the other hand, I could avoid that check, play rook takes, still threaten the knight check, okay, but also have a more dangerous position after the threat of move knight here, where my opponent may need to play a move like this, okay, to try to stop me from creating more damage in the position. And with this move, I could just win the rook after this move. And after he takes, I take, and now notice the difference that it looks like I have a whole piece up here. See? So these are variations that could be calculated. Of course, this move is good because of that. It's not just the sacrifice of a pawn for nothing, but to activate my pieces to create maybe a possible mating net. And if he doesn't take the pawn because it shouldn't take the pawn and cannot take the pawn, then king move and I will have a pass pawn. This pawn here is a pass pawn, 3 squares from queen, and actually that pawn is the one that is going to win king. So rook to c5, further improving my pieces. Now the rook creates threats also on the ranks, okay? Not only on the file, but also, not only on the file, but also on the rank. Now, he's attacking the bishop. Bishop has to move or be defended, so he play pawn to f4 to hold the bishop there. And now I play the move king to d6. Very good move. Notice, if we look at the position how it was before and how it is now, I have improved my knight, I have improved my rook, my bishop was already good and it's now even better, see? And now my opponent plays rook to the center, because I was attacking that pawn, of course, and now I play knight to e5. Notice how my next stage, after making sure that I don't have weaknesses that my opponent could attack, I had to defend my weaknesses. My next stage is to improve my pieces. And that is the stage that I have been working on, and now all of my pieces are working. My 2 knights, the rook, the bishop, and on top of that, I have a pawn. Notice this is accumulating advantages, accumulating positive points during the game. My opponent played bishop back because, of course, when I play knight to e5, I'm not only improving my knight, I'm threatening knight takes g4. And if I capture the pawn on g4, then the threat of knight e3 with a double attack will be very strong. So now my opponent has to defend. So he moves his bishop back. But by moving the bishop back, this rook is out of the game. It's just not participating if you look at it. And now I play the move knight to c4. Notice that here I could say, oh, let me just take this pawn, okay? But knight to c4 is stronger, okay? Keeping the creation of threats, okay? Now I'm threatening check to win a rook. He takes the knight, and I play knight takes with the same idea, check to win the rook. My opponent moves the rook to e5, attacking my pawn, and I push the pawn. I'm not in no need to give away material. Okay, but here, from here now, it's just a fact, a matter of some technique. This position is already winning. It's very difficult for white to save himself here. He has too many weaknesses. He has more pawns, but all the pawns are weak, and that is a problem. He has more pawns, but I am the one with the pass pawn. So when you compare the pawns, my pawns are more dangerous than his. And when you compare the pieces, my pieces are doing something, creating threats. For example, this one is defending here, holding the position. This bishop with these 2 pawns are stopping all this play. Now my knight is creating threats all over the place. So now, yes, black is better here. Rook comes to e2, and now knight takes b6. Now the pawns start to fall. King to d3, knight to d7, looking for the e5 square, looking for the c5 square afterwards. He plays pawn to c4. I play the move rook, attacking another pawn. Very, very interesting move. He plays rook to defend the pawn. Now check. King moves, take the pawn. Notice how all the pawns that he was up are now falling, because my position is better. And if my position is better, having pawns up, and it's just not going to happen. Rook takes, knight takes check. No, 2 pieces versus a rook. Notice 2 pieces will work better than 1. Notice how the knight and the king, do a very good teamwork in stopping these pawns from advancing. White has stuff, but they cannot use it. This rook is just sitting there doing nothing. So now, and this step by step, by the way, now king attacks the rook, rook goes back, king goes back here. I didn't want to rush in with the king as yet. I don't want to make moves like this, because now my opponent could play maybe a move like pawn push, and this could be dangerous. I will have to block here, and then he could bring the rook here, attacking this pawn. And then if I move to defend the pawn, well, I could defend the pawn like this. I think this would have been my only way to defend the pawn. But then this is dangerous now, because now I don't have, he could just bring rook here, and I don't have any way to improve my position. Anytime I move my knight, he's going to push the pawn. So this position is just not good. This position could even be loosened for white, for black in some variations. So that is why in this position, I decided to just come back with the king, fix the position a little bit. Notice now I will work with the king instead. Okay, capture some pawns. Now that he pushed the pawn, I have my knight there on d7, blocking the pawn. And notice how this game took a lot of steps, you know. Anytime now he blocks the protection of the rook over this pawn, so now I could have this pawn. He has a discover check, but it doesn't really worry me too much. He captures the pawn, on pawn push, and game is over. He moved the rook away, and now check. He moved the king, queen. He captures, I capture. And this game is over. These 2 pawns, plus, well, of course, knight and bishop alone, they could checkmate. So this is a very, very interesting game in which, again, technique prevailed. Notice that this game wasn't like, we didn't have like a lot of crazy tactics, but it still was a very, it had a lot of calculation. So sometimes you see in chess tactics, which is like fireworks. You say, oh, sacrifice a bishop, check, and then take a rook, or then take a queen, or push a pawn with a discover attack. All of that is good, and you have to see those things. But sometimes you just have to calculate moves, like what happens if this, then I do this, that, and you have to see, just see moves ahead. This is the older stage of calculation. If you could only see 1 move ahead, then that is your strength. If you could only see 2 moves ahead, well, then that is your strength only. So that is why we do